we're going to issue it based on the numbers on the closing statement. And your inability to agree on this thing, we're not allowed to hold up the closing for. So if you're not going to sign your seller documents and deliver all of that, you're going to be in breach of the contract. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Real Estate Show. I'm Tiffany Weber, real estate attorney in Mooresville, North Carolina. We got a couple other offices around the lake in Huntersville and Denver, and I am joined by one of my favorite guests, Layla Rogers. Welcome back.
Hi, thank you. Great to be here.
This is a fun one. What not to do at the closing table when buying a house. Specifically, what not to do in Layla's closing table. I think we agree on a lot of these.
Well, as you can imagine, I have a lot of good personal stories for this one.
Yeah. It's like, and especially when they stack up of like not just one don't, and then they have multiple. Oh, it's tough. Like, oh, we might have been able to manage through one of these, but when you stack them all together, you put me in a tough spot. I really want to start with what you've got on your list because I think it's going to be good. So take it away.
All right. Well, I would say the number one thing is to review your closing disclosure before coming to closing. Now, granted, it's not always ready.
Yeah.
Every once in a while we'll have a CD and the folks have not been able to see it until they sit down with us. That's fairly unusual, but it happens. So, if you do have your CD, 3 days before closing, 2 days, what have you, even the night before, just to please look at it and not have the first time you're looking at it be at the closing table. Because we are the dirt lawyers. We handle the dirt, the land. We don't handle the numbers.
Yeah.
So if there's issues with the CD, that isn't something that we can rectify unilaterally on our end. We have to get lender involvement, and then that takes time.
Yeah.
So I had kind of
this is super timely. Like as of just an hour ago, you were dealing with someone having not reviewed their closing statement, and when they looked at it, they're like, "Oh, this fairly important thing is not on it."
Right, right. Well, actually, and that buyer also said after we were done with everything, well, I noticed when I looked at it last night that there was this error, and I thought, oh gosh, could we have led with that?
Yeah. Let's not get the closing done, and then be like, does it matter that the XYZ credit's not on there? A little bit.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it does.
Yeah.
And I had an unfortunate situation last week. I had a senior who was closing on a home, and when we went through the CD, the monthly payment ended up being a couple $100s more than she had anticipated. And so then she was asking me about it. Well, why did this go up from what I saw before? And I said, well, unfortunately, I am not privy to seeing all the other draft disclosures that your lender has provided to you. I just don't know. So, we can continue to try and ask some questions and get revisions. But at this point, it's late in the day. Her car's packed. It's crunch time. And so we ended up just proceeding. But, I felt for her because, being on a fixed income, that couple $100, she seems stressed out about it.
Oh, absolutely. And you make a great point, too, that not only do we not see the prior drafts or the loan estimate, people will ask me all the time, well, this isn't the one that I got at the beginning of they gave me my numbers at the beginning, and this is way different. Like, well, that was your loan estimate, and I don't see it. I don't know what's on it. And I also don't know your loan terms. We might see a rate lock sheet or a commitment letter as part of the package, but not beforehand. We get a title request where we're told what the terms are, but that's from the lender. If your understanding of those terms is different, we're not going to know unless you tell us. So it's so important to look at it. Do you get it? Look at it.
Right. Yeah.
Ask questions about it. If something doesn't sit right, we're used to getting questions. Good ones, bad ones. I would say there's no bad questions, but sometimes there are. And we just got to be real about that. I should say the bad questions are when you have all the information available to you and you can process it and understand it and you just didn't try. But outside of all of those things, ask the question and early.
Right. Yeah.
What else?
Well, here's another one. Don't initiate your wire transfer for your cash to close at the closing table. It happens time and time again. We'll go through all the paperwork and then I'll say, okay, well, as soon as I receive your funds, then we'll be able to proceed with recording. And then they'll say, oh yeah, I've got to do that.
Yeah. And then they're also like, why can't I get the keys right now?
Right.
You know, it's like, okay, well, if you are going to be that person that sends your funds at the closing table, understand that the movers aren't going to be able to meet you at the house right after the closing. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, life's all about balance. You know, you make your choice. And the other thing about wires, why it would be important not to wait until the closing table is, what if you have a bank that requires in-person?
Right.
And what if there's no branches here in North Carolina? We had, if I've told you this story before, I'm sorry, but well, there's probably people listening that haven't heard it. We had a closing, it probably was like 2019. I think it was I can't remember if it was COVID or not. I feel like that would stick out to me because it wasn't necessarily like the easiest thing to hop on a flight. Her bank branch was in Maryland, required in-person transfer. She had to drive back there to send her wire. She could not initiate the wire any other way. It was a smaller bank, which doesn't necessarily mean if you're dealing with a smaller bank, you'll have this problem, but this particular one did. So she's sitting there like, cash to close is like $140,000. And she's like, but I have my checkbook here. I'm like, that's not going to work. You know, we have to have cleared funds. Those funds have to be cleared irrevocably in my trust account for us to disperse. And your personal check is not, you will be able to drive to Maryland, initiate your wire, and be back. And we'll be able to close and you move into your house probably for 5 to 10 days before those funds are irrevocably cleared in my trust account. Like, it's heartbreaking, but it's true. So,
right. Yeah. Thinking about your cash to close and where it's going to come from is something that should be thought about weeks ahead of time. I mean, you won't have that final number weeks ahead of time, but knowing what your bank requirements are, do you have to go in person? Can you do it online? I always discourage ever wiring from an investment account because that can have substantial delays. I've had closings delayed 3-4 days.
Yeah.
When people have tried to initiate investment account wires at the closing table.
Those securities have to be liquidated. Yeah, they have a value assigned to it, but that doesn't correlate to dollars in your bank account. So, right. and your whoever is your advisor might be like suggesting you wait due to something, like there might be a better reason to not liquidate that today. There's great point because it's not so straightforward. I like your list. What else do you have?
Well, here's another personal experience. Actually, one of the other attorneys in our office dealt with this one, but she was in a closing with a couple that was separated, and they had a separation agreement. And most of the time, folks won't come together, but they did. So they were both in the closing table at opposite ends of the table. And they were going through the closing statement, and the separation agreement had some detailed numbers as to payoffs that had to be made for credit card debt that they had that was coming out of the closing proceeds. And we, as the closing attorneys and officers of the court, were bound by these legal documents, these separation agreements.
I can tell you're a former litigator because only litigators past and present use the term officers of the court.
You busted me there. That's true. So they started arguing about the balances. And, one was saying, well, I paid that down. And then the other was saying, well, what about this one? And so they kind of started, arguing with each other in the room. And here's the thing. We are not family law attorneys. We are not here. 90% of the time, we're representing the buyer. We're not even representing the sellers that are going through all this. And
no dog in that fight.
Exactly. So we're not there to try and smooth things over and negotiate all of this because, again, we're bound by what's in the separation agreement. And if there's any dispute over it or any changes that need to be made, those have to be done with the family law attorney.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I have no problem wiring proceeds to a family law attorney to hold in their trust account so that they can sort everything out.
You guys figured out.
But yeah, not something that we do here.
Yeah.
They're a little dicey.
I remember a similar situation. They didn't come at the same time, but they were arguing over to whom the 1099, the tax burden should be allocated, because one was getting a distributive award and the other was taking the remainder of the proceeds. And, there was case law saying that the distributive award shouldn't be a taxable event. And, but none of that information had been given to us. And I'm like, in the absence of you guys agreeing, we're going to issue it based on the numbers on the closing statement. And your inability to agree on this thing, we're not allowed to hold up the closing for. So if you're not going to sign your seller documents and deliver all of that, you're going to be in breach of the contract, and you will get sued for specific performance, and you will pay their attorney's fees. You guys got to figure it out. And I'd kind of gotten roped into drafting some documents and this. I'm like, wait, I don't represent any of y'all. I'm not getting paid for any of this. We have a buyer who needs to close, and it's y'all's. Y'all got to figure this out. It wasn't all that long after Ben Thomas had passed away, so my patience was razor thin. I consider myself to be a pretty patient person, but thinking back to that time, not my best, not my most patient, but exactly like you said, not the family law attorneys. We are not invested whatsoever in the outcome of that. We're invested in getting our buyer to the finish line, closed with clear title. Mm-hmm. Our lists were really similar. There's one, though, that you might have two, but the not panicking if something goes wrong. Mm-hmm. Or just not panicking in general, because sometimes people will be panicking over something that's truly a non-issue. Mm-hmm. Guess what? There's probably going to be typos at some point. If you do enough of these transactions, there's going to be a document that probably needs to get corrected. If you do one transaction in your life, then you might be able to reasonably expect that there's not going to be any issues. But 10 of those, something's going to be a little off and have to be fixed, and that's normal. But we'll have people get really worked up about that. Understand it's a lot of times high stakes, a lot of money involved, a lot of time, a lot of just emotions across the board. But if we're not worried, and if you're listening on audio, I'm pointing to Layla and myself, as in if the attorneys are not worried and we're telling you this is an easy fix, we mean it. And this is not something to stress out about. You're going to close in the exact same time frame. There was one I had last week where the lender had sent over the documents and the scale was not good. Meaning when the documents would print out, the print was super small. It wouldn't meet recording standards. And our closer kind of felt well, this is how the lender they sent it this way, and I think that's how they want it. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, I think that's a mistake. Let's go back to them. And they were like, oh, yeah, we can't accept them like that anyway. And thankfully the buyers were cool, but I'm like, hey, you see how all this is teeny tiny? It's not supposed to be. Hang tight. You're still going to close on time. I'm going to get you out on the exact same, you won't be here a minute longer than you expected. And I held to that. It was right at the thing, but that could have been someone freaking out and making it a big deal. And, don't panic. Mm-hmm. And even if something does go wrong, if there's a path forward to correct it, don't expend all of your mental energy. You got a lot of other stuff to worry about. Let the people that you have engaged to do certain things for you do what they do best and get it figured out. Have you had any of those where you've got somebody just panicking in the room?
Oh boy. Actually, I've got a great example. And I'll be honest with you, I may have been panicking slightly inside.
I wonder if I know which one it is. Is it from since you've been with us?
It is. Okay. It is. So I had a gentleman who showed me his driver's license, and I noted that his last name on his license did not match his loan documents.
This is not the one I was thinking of, even though you told me that you were going to talk about it.
Well, I want to think of what you're thinking of. Maybe we'll still talk about it. And, I said, well, what's the deal here? It doesn't match your loan documents. I'm going to have to, go work on getting all this changed. And he says to me, well, I moved here from out of state. The state that I lived in previously messed up my last name. And then when I came to North Carolina, I asked them to fix it, and they wouldn't. And I said, well, what is your last name?
And in the eyes of the law, what is your name, sir?
So how he had the loan documents, he said was his real last name. And I said, well, this is presenting me with some serious notary concerns. And so I went back to the lender. I sent them a copy of the ID. They had no idea. And so then they said, okay, well, we're going to have to put this whole thing through underwriting again. You know, we'll get back to you. And so it just wasn't real clear that we were still going to close that day. And so then, you know, I went back in the room and I was, you know, chatting with the agent. And then I just said, you know, offhand, I said, well, you don't by any chance have any other sort of government issued ID with you that has a different last name on it, do you? And sure enough, he had a passport in his car with a different last name than what was on his ID, on his driver's license.
Yeah.
And I said,
Great.
All right, full steam ahead. I'm not really sure who you are, but we're doing this.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That one, that's good problem solving there. The one that I was thinking of was definitely something going wrong, and it was the tree falling on the house during the hurricane.
Oh, yes, that's
But
right.
it sounded like, you know, you can tell the story, but I was pretty impressed with how you explained it. Like, people kept their heads about him.
They did. They really did. I mean, they really, you know, the weather was awful. The hurricane had just passed over Charlotte. We were still keeping our 10 a.m. closing appointment. You know, everybody battled through the rain to get to our Denver office. And they had tried to do their final walkthrough right before signing, and they couldn't. They couldn't access the property because there was a tree down, tangled in power lines in front of the house. And so, you know, luckily these buyers and sellers had a great rapport. So we were able to talk through the options. So they
didn't have power, so you had to handwrite.
Yes, yes. No power. Well, no internet, so there was couldn't type up anything, and so we went ahead and hand wrote a document stating that, you know, the sellers would take care of it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it all worked out. But yes, talk about a moment of panic. But everyone really just kept their wits about them, and
That
we
could have gone
moved forward.
completely sideways.
It could have.
And I think that speaks to a lot of like, it is, I didn't witness this, but I know that you had to be a steady, calm presence in the room, because if you're amped up, everyone else is going to be, even if they're not inclined to be. You're your person of authority in the room. So, you know, like, kudos, because you're a crucial element in keeping people rowing in the same direction and not ready to, like, you know, just lay down in the parking lot as the rain pours down on them. Man, those are some good ones. I'm so glad that, like, your list is really good. You've got some good stories. So that's it, folks. That's what not to do at Layla's closing table when buying a house. I agree with every single one of them. And a lot of it is just going back to preparedness. You know, it's really easy during the hustle and bustle of home purchasing to want to let certain things slide or think it's not worth your time. But these little things can become big things if not attended to. So thank you so much for your stories and your expertise today.
Happy to be here. Thank you.